there's this thing called game theory, which is optimal strategy. So, for example, if you think about whether you play poker or not, people understand this. If I never bluff, you're going to take my money because you're going to know if I bet that I have it and you're just going to fold. If I always bluff, you're going to take my money because you're just going to call like crazy. So there's an optimal amount of bluffing to do, and there's an optimal strategy. There's a range. And once you know that range, there's also an optimal counter strategy to how often to call bluffs, right? And that's game theory equilibrium.
What is up, friends? And thank you for hanging out with us today on the Abundant Journey podcast. As always, I'm your host, Nick James, with Nick Offenkamp. We have a special guest lined up today, Ethan Foulkes, and he is a business owner, entrepreneur with an amazing journey. But I'm going to put you on pause, Ethan. We're going to have just a brief little segment here. Nick is hanging out in Canada, and if you are watching our YouTube channel, he is sporting the Canadian hat. And I just had to give a shout out to that one because we want to get our listeners checking out the YouTube channel. But Nick, how's Canada, man?
Canada's great. We came up here, ironically, for the 4th of July, which, some people think that that's very unpatriotic, but actually I just view that as a way of establishing American dominance throughout the world. So now my father-in-law is not super pleased with my mentality towards that, seeing as all of my wife's family is Canadian. But we've been having an amazing time up here, and they did get me the Canadian hat, and I decided to rock it this morning just to make you smile, Nick.
I love it. I'm grateful for that. Well, Ethan, thanks for indulging us on that moment there while you sat. You are not in Canada. You are a true-blooded American hanging out in South Carolina. And tell us, man, it's great to have you on. Thanks for hanging out with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, Ethan, we've been connected with another guest, Toby Lucich. We loved having him on the podcast. He is your business partner, and you've known him for a long time. I'm sure there's going to be a few fun stories in today's episode between y'all's relationship. But tell us a little bit about who you are. What's a day in the life looking like for you today?
Yeah, sure. So, I guess I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I've always got sucked into other people's journeys, right? So I guess, as a kid, I was always doing whatever the latest scheme was to make money. And then you grow up, you start doing jobs. And every time I'd hang out my shingle and do my own thing, I'd get sucked into somebody else's company, and off we go, and more learnings, which is really fun and I'm grateful for. But Toby's my co-founder at Magic Button Labs. And I think about 3 years ago, we finally sat down and we said, let's do this thing. And I made a personal commitment to say, this time, nobody's sucking me into their journey. I'm doing my thing. And so that's what Toby and I have been doing.
I love it. And for our listeners that might be unfamiliar with Magic Button Labs, what is the business? What have you been building over the past few years here?
Yeah. Well, I've had to learn. I didn't know what it was in the beginning. What we're doing is a venture studio, which means 0 to 1 launching of companies out of Magic Button Labs. And so we didn't know that when we started. We discovered that maybe a year ago. So our first company was called Clutch, and it was around software development and simplifying how software gets built by teams and helping people understand what that language looks like, how to interact with them. And now we are in soft launch, getting ready for hard launch of ScaleKits, which is business operations. It's simplifying how teams organize their worlds and just saying, look, this is how you do it. There's a home for everything. We can put everything in the home, and we can just organize you extremely quickly. And then we can automate to integrate to all the other tools out there that you use.
That's awesome. And that's so incredible to think of just figuring that out a year ago, basically 2 years into the business. And so I know that we'd love to get into the backstory, but just since we're on this, I would really like to hear, okay, what does that process look like? That it's such a common motif among entrepreneurs that you set out thinking that you're going to do one thing, and then you make a series of pivots, and then all of a sudden you've got a totally different thing. I remember listening to the story of Airbnb and the different pivots that they made along the way. And so I'm curious what that looked like for you guys as you started out with one vision and how that morphed over time.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think the core vision that we wanted to do is we're still true to it, which is to simplify expertise, which is to take the way that I've looked at the world going through big business and going through consulting is that the only way to get true expertise is to spend, a decade in the trenches doing the thing. And so by the time you are truly an expert, there's very few companies that can afford to pay you for your expertise. So expertise just aggregates at the top in the big companies. And there's far more companies that need that expertise that can't afford it. But those experts are busy delivering it to just a few people. So that the core of our philosophy is simplifying and we like to say democratizing expertise. So really what Magic Button Labs is, which we now know as a venture studio, is a safe place to help an expert leave that world and simplify and box up what they know into a format that can be given to not hundreds, but thousands of the smaller companies that need it. That's what Magic Button Labs is. And then out of that, that's where all the pivots come from. Oh, we're simplifying accounting, we're simplifying IT, operations, software development, but it's all different teams that are essentially forming companies and going through that 0 to 1 process. And that's part of that evolution I was talking about is, it was confusing to go out into the world and talk about Magic Button Labs and just jump all over the place. So that was part of the learning we wanted of what are we doing here and how do we communicate it to the world? And now with that understanding, we can say, oh, did you want to talk about Magic Button Labs, the venture studio? Or did you want to talk about ScaleKits, the company that's simplifying operations, right? Like we can have one of those conversations.
Yeah. Nice.
No, that's super helpful. And I love that. We're going to spend some time here today diving in more to the nuts and bolts of what you guys do, how you are bringing this to market. And I'm excited for that. But let's go a little bit back here into your story. You mentioned that entrepreneurial spirit has been a part of you and, you've been sucked into different people's journeys. I'm sure there's nuggets of wisdom and lessons you've learned along the way from being sucked into those. But let's go back as far as you want to here. Tell us a little bit about, were your family, you come from entrepreneurs? Do you, was that something that you picked up in college? What's that look like?
Yeah, definitely not from a family of entrepreneurs. Have no idea how I got the bug. It was just kind of always there. Always the lemonade stand and the mowing the lawns and all that stuff. First job was a paper route, probably 13 or 14. Started making money playing a card game called Magic the Gathering and winning tournaments and trading and selling. Making money at these online RPG games, figuring out how to sell the items on eBay because it's just a virtual item. Who cares? So all down that path, selling cable boxes out of the back of my car, just like anything. But I don't know where it came from. So yeah, that's as far back as I can remember. I have no idea what it's like. Yeah, I didn't know. Like nowadays I'm surrounded by we teach people how to do entrepreneurship. Like it's a known thing. You can just go learn. But, doing that, 30 years ago, I was just like, there were no models. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just trying to figure out how to make money.
Yeah. Did you have goals for that, like with the money that you were trying to make, or was it just kind of a game to you of being able to say, hey, I can flip this into that? Or it seems to be a theme that's pretty consistent among most successful entrepreneurs that we've had on here. Is just the gamification of business, entrepreneurship, the gamification of making money and finding just a pleasure in being able to play the game and figure it out. So that doesn't surprise me at all. But what were you saying? Sorry to cut you off there.
Because the way I look at it too is there's always a game within the game, right? And that's what I'm interested in. Like the game is the rules, it's the surface level, it's the thing, but what's underlying that? Like, how do I deconstruct this down into first principles and how do I think about it differently than other people think about it? Because I can't control the rules of the game. Like those are set by somebody else, but I can think about those rules differently than other people think about them. And I can accomplish something that other people aren't trying to accomplish within that game. That's the part that fascinates me.
Ethan, I wonder if you have any example from that. And the reason I bring it up is my mind often goes to a lot of the noise with entrepreneurs nowadays of hustle culture and folks who are proclaiming just work harder than everybody else or outpace everybody else. And, you really in the conversations we've had, there's a little bit of a contrarian thinking mentality there of deconstructing the game. Do you got any examples of maybe your approach with something like that?
Yeah, sure. I'll give you the one that cemented it for me because I didn't know that wiring when I was going through it, right? I was just doing whatever I was doing. So one of the fun parts of my career was after going through IT for a long time, I ended up as a professional poker player for about a decade. And I was going through playing poker for a living back in the heyday of online poker. So I had done all the studying and learning in college before everybody knew what it was, that you can make money. And then all of a sudden, there's crazy money to be made in online poker. And so what I would do, there's these large games, right, where you buy in for $2,000 on each table. You can play 10, 20 tables at a time. You're swapping a lot of money back and forth. But you could also go play down at the lowest stakes, right? 1 cent, 2 cent, where you're dropping 50 cents on a table. And what I learned there was that, so there's this thing called game theory, which is optimal strategy. So, for example, if you think about whether you play poker or not, people understand this. If I never bluff, you're going to take my money because you're going to know if I bet that I have it and you're just going to fold. If I always bluff, you're going to take my money because you're just going to call like crazy. So there's an optimal amount of bluffing to do, and there's an optimal strategy. There's a range. And once you know that range, there's also an optimal counter strategy to how often to call bluffs, right? And that's game theory equilibrium. But back in the day, game theory wasn't solved in poker. Like, people knew some of it, but not all of it. So what I would do is I would take some money under a different name on a different site, and I would go play at the lowest stakes, and I would just experiment with something weird. I do a really weird thing that nobody thought you could do well, and I'd just play with it until I understood the parts that worked and didn't work, and more importantly, I understood how people would react to it. That's the game within the game. So then I would take that learning and that experience, and I would go right up to the highest stakes, and I would just throw a bomb in the game, right? Everyone's like, whoa, what's going on? Why is he doing that? It's like, and then they would start learning the counter strategies, but I'd already learned what they were going to think and what they were going to try. And so then they would finally catch up, and it would become part of the known game theory. And so then I'd go back down to the lowest stakes, and I'd experiment with some other weird, crazy strategy. So that's what poker taught me, is like, hey, it's to your point. I say that because to your point of hustle culture, it was never about work more and harder. It was just like, go figure something out. Take however long it takes to figure out a first principle, an underlying concept that other people don't know, and how to apply it. And then all of a sudden, boom, you'll have success.
That's an awesome approach. I love that story. And so I'm curious, as you're learning how to play the game of entrepreneurship and building businesses, getting into this world of online poker. At some point that matured from online poker to real world business. And you mentioned being sucked into a few different ventures. I am curious, what that whole process looked like for you. Like, what was kind of the first legitimate business that you went out to start on your own, or and then what did that morph into as you kind of saw other opportunities?
Yeah, the first real business was actually within poker. So I opened one of the first online poker schools, taught hundreds of people how to play poker. And then I built my first software application. I didn't build it, got a team that built it. So we built the first kind of it's called fish finding program. So it's basically just a database. We captured a huge database of statistics on players. And then we ran some very simple calculations to find who lost the most money, and then compare those people against the lists of active tables. So what that allowed us to do is, if you're playing 10 tables, rather than a random 10 tables, play the most profitable 10 tables that are active. So I turned that into a business. So we would teach people how to play, and then we would sell them access to this tool, and just be like, hey, you can double your hourly rate essentially by using our tool. So that was the first one.
Oh,
yeah.
I'll say this, I'm not a poker player, but I'm never playing Go Fish with you since you have figured out the ways to take the money.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Well,
We can find another activity.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that.
I'm terrible at pool.
I don't know.
I'm terrible at pool, so we could just wager on that instead.
Okay, there we go. Said every pool shark ever.
That's right. What, Ethan, in that, you've shared how you started to look at entrepreneurship different. You started to look at the game different, and that has served you. What were some other skills or things you learned in those early stages of your journey?
I don't know that anything jumps out at me specifically. And I don't know if I was doing it intentionally, but it was really just always looking for another set of experiences. So what is it? Have you been doing it have you been doing the same thing for 10 years, or did you do 10 different things for a year? And I was really always aligned towards the latter, right? So I'd gone deep into IT, done everything in IT prior to poker. And when it was time to go back to the real world out of poker, I was like, I want to do anything but IT. And so I took a job in the food importing industry with a family friend, the one that always joked when I was a kid, like, oh, I'll hire you when you're ready. I was like, okay, Larry, hire me. And he was like, oh boy, really? And I was like, yeah, I'll do whatever. And so I accepted a job. I didn't know what I would be doing, how much I would make. I just knew I didn't want to go back to IT. Right. And so, that ended up with me doing a circuit through operations and logistics and accounting and learning the ropes and helping. And that's really how I landed. Ultimately, there's a whole lot of companies in between, ultimately doing what Toby and I are doing with ScaleKits right now. Because as I was doing that tour, I was like learning about that function of a business. And I was going, wait a minute. There's tools that can help. There's integrations we can do. There's automations. And I would just start to streamline and connect things. And then all of a sudden I was back in IT because I was in charge of all the systems and tools that we had put together. And I was like, yeah, it's time to go. I'm going to go be a consultant. I'm going to go do this, right? Like anything else not to land back in that world.
That's really fascinating. I mean, that kind of sticking with that contrarian theme. So much of the advice today is really to specialize, to niche down, to find your one thing, and to get your 10,000 hours as quickly as possible. And then just to do that over and over and over. And, the better you become at it, the more you'll get paid. But I think it is really interesting, your approach of that, it sounds like it's more personality driven, even of just, I got bored of that or sick of that and wanted to learn something else, see a different side of business. I imagine that that's prepared you really well for your role now as a CEO. I'm curious if you want to elaborate on that at all, whether what advantages you see, encouragement to our listeners to consider your approach of doing the 10 different jobs over 10 years, as well as unique ways that's set you up for success in your business.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Nick, because I think now we're past the world of specialization. Like, not to discount it, that we need experts in things, but there was a point in time pre-internet, social, pre-YouTube, let's just say, because you can learn anything on YouTube, just like if you're willing to just watch. Like, learning cycles have been shortened, and so while you still need experts, that deep expertise can be gained much quicker. And so now the generalist is kind of the new, what historically we said it was all about, the expert, that went deep on this thing. It's like, well, now wait, are you a generalist? Can you connect dots across 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different fields or areas of expertise? That's actually the thing that we're losing. We have so many experts. We have so many tools that will push you into an area of expertise. And if I connect it back to the ScaleKits thing, what Toby and I have seen around that theme is that you have all these different best of breed tools out there, and you can go become an expert as this thing in this tool. So everybody's an expert in their thing in a tool. And the whole company has lost that holistic understanding of how the business works. How do teams interact? How do they hand work off to each other? What is the flow that a customer goes through your company as they're handed off from team to team? Like, that's starting to be lost, especially inside of these small companies, because everybody's an expert in their one thing.
Yeah.
So on a training standpoint, with you guys and you come in, I know that there's a lot of problem solving. I know that there's a lot of process implementation, and those are just, those are kind of the core backbone. But let's camp on that a little bit with the types of customers that you're interacting with and the types of companies. Why has that been lost? I mean, why is that everybody's just kind of in their tunnel, in their silo, and what do you see in the future of business moving forward with that?
Yeah, it's a good question. Part of it is definitely what I just talked about of deep expertise and all of these different tools. The tool landscape, QuickBooks and PandaDocs and DocuSign and Figma for design and Canva, like everybody's living in a different tool is part of it. But then the other thing that happened to me, so I did a stint as a consultant, like running a decent sized consulting professional services arm of a company, right? So we're consulting for lots of companies. And what I saw, what happens is people go through a growth stage where eventually they're kind of bursting at the seams. Things are breaking. And so they reach out for help. And when they do that, what they do is they show their mess. They go, look, this is the mess. And we spend a lot of time looking at your mess, right? That's what you were just getting at, Nick. Like, okay, well, show me that. And how is that broken? And ultimately, we already know what the solution is, but we spend all this time. This is the part I loved it for a bit, and then I got bored with it. Is like, why am I wasting time and money with you showing me another version of how the mess always plays out? And I got fascinated with productization, which is why Toby and I are doing what we're doing, because I said, hey, what if we skip all of that? And what if instead of you showing me your mess and me spending time like trying to massage my picture of good, what if I just showed you what right looks like? And what if I did such a good job simplifying the explanation and showing it to you that by the time I'm done, you just go, oh, that looks like what I need. And we just abandon this whole thing of like massaging your mess. And we just say, well, here it is. We already built that for you, right? Like I was teaching and explaining and describing in the abstract. There's a whole solution that's already built. And so that's what we would call a day one solution, right? Not wait 30 days, 60 days, 6 months as you get into these bigger projects. It's like, no, right now, sign on this line and let's put you into this world tomorrow. It's already built. You can start on day one. That's at the core of our philosophy.
What a cool way that is of flipping the process on its head. And I imagine that's been really exciting for a lot of the businesses that you're working with, because not only does it get boring for you, but I'm sure that for them, having to go through that full like introspective process can be a really discouraging, dark 30 days as you're putting all the crap on the table and it doesn't feel like you're really making any sort of progress. Whereas it sounds to me like you've kind of figured out more or less the one size fits all systems for business that you're able to implement day one and then go through and make optimizations that are business specific, rather than feel like you're having to essentially build from the ground up with each new client.
Yeah, but to put a finer point on it, because I almost get scared when I hear you say it's a one size fits all, because it is, but it isn't. What it is sitting down and being extremely intentional. Yeah. So if I go up a level out of ScaleKits to Magic Button Labs and that venture studio, and how do you democratize expertise? What you do is you create a safe space for that expert to sit down and find exactly where do you cross over from the one size fits all best practice into the customization, because every company at every stage does need both. The bigger you are, the more mature you are, the more you need the customization and the less you need the foundation. But the foundation is the same. It's like, actually, the foundation never changes. It's how much customization and specialization do you need? And so part of what we do is we sit down and we say, hey, if we're going to simplify organization and operations across all these tools, that's the ScaleKits thing, then what we have to do is we have to look at how we've solved that in the big businesses. And we have to say, okay, what are the first principles of why we do it this way? You identify those first principles because that means they're abstracted away from the very complex, heavy ways that you do it in big businesses. And you go, they do this thing because of this first principle. You assemble those first principles and then you pivot and you go look at the smaller companies and you say, what is this company of 20 people that are right at that bursting of the seams phase? They need the first principle. They just don't need all that crazy language and these heavy things. I use the analogy of travel, right? Like if the three of us are going to go do a trip to a cabin so we can play poker together, right? I think we're planning that. Then the travel is the travel, right? But the question is like, are we going to go to a little cabin that's like 15 minutes away that maybe we could walk to, or we could ride our bikes, or are we going to get in a car, or are we going to get in a plane, right? But like the foundational principle of like, we have to decide who's going, when are we going, who's in charge of booking, like these principles are the same. And then you just either walk there or get on a bike or get in a car or get in a plane. That's just the more heavy horsepower. And I think what happens, that gap, is that all of that expertise accumulates at the top, and they only speak about travel on airplanes and going to different companies and passports and visas. And then when you take that language and that plane travel and you bring it to this person and you go, yeah, you start talking about needing to apply. They're like, forget it. I don't want to do the trip. That's too much. It's too heavy. You're scaring me. And so that's that process of simplification that we do.
Sure. That's a helpful analogy.
Well, and I think too, even in my banking role, going from a small business banker to jumping into commercial banking, I mean, even just the needs of these different companies are so large. I mean, with small business, those folks are on the line and they're the ones actually manning the press or manning the machine, then all the way to these large corporations that you're talking about, where they've built those systems and some are functioning well, and others they've probably piecemealed along the journey. So I'm curious, as we're talking about solving problems for this huge range of companies, what are some of the problems that you see everybody faces, and are there ways to get ahead of it, as you foresee them coming up, or is it more of a reactive mode?
There's absolutely ways to see them coming up. Those are the best practices, the first principles. Like everybody's going to go through these same problems. The one that's always fascinated me that we're knee deep in from this ScaleKits, this COO in a box, and how do you organize teams as you're at that bursting at the seams phase. What people don't realize is that there's a managerial level that sits in between sales and marketing and operations, right? So we all are familiar with, you got marketing and you got to close the deal to get the money in. And then we know that teams have to do the work, right? So whatever the thing is, it has to be done by one person, multiple people, multiple teams. And we conceptually understand that there's a layer in between there of oversight and visibility and management and forest for the trees, but it's rarely ever built out where companies have this. And so that's why it's sort of like this black box at a certain point. If we're a small team, if there's 5 of us, everybody knows everything. You don't need to formalize that layer. But as soon as you get into, we have a different team for sales and a different team for delivery, and we're starting to have this management layer, everybody's blind because the trees view is too detailed and it's too much. And the forest view is too high level to actually do anything. And so what's that middle layer? Every company has that problem and that pain, even if they don't know that that's what they're verbalizing, and that there's first principle solutions for it. And so like, that's when we talk about those day ones. So we've already baked that in. Like, we know you have marketing, we know you have sales, we know you have operations and accounting, and we know this is the missing link. So we built all those homes, and we also built the connections between them. That's how we can step people into that world. That's one example, but there's endless of those. Like in your world of banking, Nick, right? Like you see, if you sit back for a moment, you're like, oh, they're doing the same things in banking at scale and in the smaller companies, but they do it differently, or they think about it differently, or they have different concerns, right? Because, I'm just a signer in a big company and it doesn't impact my pocket. But when I sign as a small business owner, like, I could be putting my house on the line. So I think differently about signing on that dotted line, but I'm doing the same thing conceptually.
Yeah. And, it's funny kind of as we even think about marketing and sales. I know here we're talking about the clients and businesses that you serve, but it does raise a question for me. Just, as you're 3 years into building this business, I know how difficult it is to just build something, but there's a whole nother set of challenges when it comes to, okay, you've built this amazing productized service. Now, how in the world do you get it out in front of the right clients and business owners and actually get adoption? And so what has that process looked like for you guys? What are some of the wins that you've seen, and what are some of the struggles that you've had with actually getting this thing out in the world?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. That's one I've been thinking about and talking about a lot lately, because I think if you're wired to be an entrepreneur and to build a business, you're in love with doing something. You're in love with building something and solving a problem. And oftentimes what that means is you're not in love with, or you're not familiar with how to do marketing and sales. And ultimately that's where so much waste comes from, is that we overbuild. And we build because we're just in love with it and we're good at it. And so a lot of what my personal journey has been, and a lot of what we work to bake into that Magic Button Labs venture studio approach, is how to break that cycle and say, just go get to selling and marketing, and learn customer acquisition and top of funnel and how to communicate what you do. Because ultimately, when you have paying customers, you will figure out how to build whatever you need to build as fast as you need to. And you won't waste the time and money. But that's like the most common mistake. And like, I'm still guilty of it. We've overbuilt this stuff. And then that's the phase that we're at. Like, hey, we built this amazing thing. Like, you can tell I'm passionate about it. I want to connect everything. I've got all these patterns, and it's like, that's too much for them. So it's like, wait, hold on. Now put that down and simplify it. What exactly is the pain that they're feeling? Who is that target market? And how do I say the right thing to them when I'm on the phone with them, such that they just go, ooh, that sounds like what I need. And that's the thing that we struggle with as entrepreneurs, I think.
Yeah, totally.
So I think that's super helpful. And it's interesting to talk about that overbuilding, because we're oftentimes so focused on solving problems in business. What is an example of overbuilding that you guys have seen, and what impact does that have on the business itself?
There's endless, almost in my experience, almost everybody does it, but I'll give you our current example, right? So ScaleKits, basically home for everything in its home, the best practices, that management layer. We built it all. We also built this huge engine that we call the Automagic engine, which connects at the tail end of your sales cycle. When you close a customer for the first time, our Automagic engine can kick in and create a home in all of the other SaaS tools that you use. It can create a home in QuickBooks and PandaDocs and Slack and SharePoint, Google Drive, whatever you use to run your business. And it'll create all those pathways so that then we can send our robots running up and down those pathways, right? And so we built out all this infrastructure. It's hugely valuable. It's hugely powerful. And I went and sold it to customers, right? But it wasn't an easy sale because it was a big, heavy conversation, and it freaked out a lot of these smaller companies. And so as we went through our first round, right, so we got we have a framework 1-4-14. So we sold our 0 to 1 customer, and then we got our 3 1 to 4 customers, and we made our hypothesis on our ICP and started trying to sell to 10 to prove it. And I was like, this isn't going to work. This is too heavy. It's too hard. It's not working. And so that's the whole point of the framework. You stop, you realize, you reset. And what we learned as we went back to user research is what our customers wanted was not that engine that does all of that stuff. They wanted it later. They were interested in it. What they wanted was the assurance that they have a mess and they don't know where to put things. And if they sign up with us, we will just get on calls with them and they can just barf their mess at us. And we'll be like, yep, it goes in this home, that home, there. And they'll be like, oh, you'll do that for me? It's like, yeah, all the homes are already built. We don't have to waste time. You don't have to show us your mess. You just dump it. Like literally, sometimes our customers take pictures of sticky notes that are on their desk or monitors, and they just send us the picture and we say, what is that? What is that? Give us some examples, and we model it for them. So in that learning, like the moment I learned that's what they want, and I got on these phone calls, like no longer am I doing demos. No longer am I even showing PowerPoints. I'm just having a 30-minute call where they're like, yeah, that'd be cool. Let's do a demo. I do a quick demo and they're like, yeah, great. It's like our highest package is 5K. That's what everybody takes, even though we have lower offerings. And we just go, good, we can start whenever you want. And I just started having our one call close, which is like on the call. People are like, yeah, they start to hesitate because they know they're, and then we've had people just say, this is silly. I know I'm going to do this. Let's go. And I'm like, yes, all of that's success. That's it. And in getting there, I look backwards and I go, we built an entire engine we didn't need to build to go get those customers. It's not a true waste, because once we get them in that system, the next thing that they will ask for is how do we automate and integrate, and we'll have already done the work. But we could have turned on the revenue machine a year earlier than we did and started that process and gotten those learnings and those customers and made that whole process buttoned up a year earlier. So it's like we always do that.
100%. I mean, it's so insightful in terms of just the entrepreneur's sort of endless desire to build and realizing that actually less can be more, especially when it comes to acquiring your first customers. How do you think through the MVP, minimum viable product, when it's time to ship? I know kind of every different company and CEO has a different thought on what the standards need to be before you actually ship something. So as our listeners wrestle through that, what are your thoughts there?
Sure. Yeah, MVP is a dangerous term. So if I go the contrarian route, I can't stand MVP as a term because it allows people to think way too big. And to like, if you're an entrepreneur, you're a builder, and you have expertise, which means there is something in your head and you have a desire to manifest it, to get it out of your world and to build it. That's what I was just talking about. And so you will manifest that, you will morph your definition of MVP to fit your desire to build more. And so that's why I talk about this 1-4-14 framework that we put a bunch of work into like getting clear on, because what it says is like you're going to go through phases of your journey to get to product market fit, right? Product market fit being we know what we do, who we do it for, how much we make, right? We have a machine that anybody could now run and scale. Prior to that, you're actually going to go through different stages of the journey to get there. And the first stage is 0 to 1, which is go get one customer. And this is what I tell people all the time. I'm like, here's like a list of things that you don't need to go get a customer. A website. You don't even need an LLC. You don't need a website. You don't need a business card. You don't need any of this stuff. You know what you need? Your phone. Because like you can just start calling people and say, here I am, you know me, like this is what I'm good at and passionate about, but I want to do it differently. And pay me $1 because you got to pay me something and I'll just half work for free for you. It's like, you just go get a customer. And so I like that framing as opposed to MVP framing, because MVP framing lets us expand the goal. And it's like, you can't go get a customer right now. Like you're an expert at something or you just have mad passion about something, like just go get a customer. And then guess what? All of the things that you would have done in an MVP, you won't do 80% of them.
Interesting. I like that framework a lot. Yep. So get your first one. And I know that, okay, so you shared it with us as far as what that's looked like for your business, but I don't know that you explicitly just hit, okay, what's the rest of the framework? So you get your first customer from there. What's the next 3 more steps, right?
Yeah, so 1-4-14. Let's. I love this topic. So 0 to 1 is that first stage, and the reason that we say, and it's not a strict thing, right? So like you'll probably have more than one 0 to 1 customer, what that means is anybody that I interact with and sell to before I have successfully gotten a win from a customer is a 0 to 1 customer, because I'm just relying on like pure passion and energy and picking up the phone. Because the moment I've delivered my thing to one customer, I can show up differently in the world, because now I don't go, trust me, I'm an expert at this. I'm like, I can say, trust me, I'm an expert at this. And you can talk to Nick because I've already done it for Nick, right? I don't have to say I did it at a steep discount. I just have to say, and I've changed Nick's life, and you can talk to him. Right? So that's 0 to 1. So the next one is 1 to 4, which says go get 3 customers. There's an underline, and I'm talking about the sales cycle, but this underpins everything: operations, go to market, your business model, all of those things. So then we say, let's go to 1 to 4. Let's go get 3 customers. Around these phases, what you have to do, the reason we have these phases is because on this journey, what you have to do is, it's a mess. Entrepreneurship is a mess, right? And everything roller coaster and all of a sudden you're going to have success with something, right? Like you're going to deliver to that first customer and you're going to get a smile and a win, and you're going to want to keep doing that because everything else is falling apart and that thing is working. But these phases that you go through, they help you realize that you actually have to also stop doing these things that are actually working, because they're not going to serve you. What got you here won't get you there. So I found you, Nick, because I called you and you're my buddy and you agreed to do this, right? Well, I could go call more of my buddies and do discounted work. But no, now I need to go find 3 customers that are nothing like Nick. I need a big customer, a small customer, a tech company, a blue collar company. Like I need to go experiment so that I can learn who would my ICP, my ideal client profile be, right? And so now we put that down and we move into that next phase. So that's the 1 to 4 where we get 3 customers. And then we say, okay, now hard stop. Now you've delivered to at least 4 customers. You've talked to many more of them, and you've had some experiences, both good and bad. Hey, it didn't work well when I tried to do this with a big company or with too small of a company or whatever. And so now we form an actual hypothesis. Now is when we say, hey, I think this would be my ideal client, and I think this should be my pricing model. You don't have to think about those things prior to this. And now we say, okay, if I'm right about that, I should be able to go sell 10 customers. That's the journey from 4 to 14. And that's where a lot of you usually cycle through that. I just told the story of us cycling. We thought we had it figured out because we sold the 3 very easily. And then I was like, it's too hard to sell the next 10. Like I can't figure out how we'll do this. So we had to reset. And you just keep resetting until you go, oop, I'm through the 10. And now you're in 14 plus. There's a whole nother round of things you do. And now you're ready for the traditional advice that you will find out in the world. Now you're ready for an investor and to have a website and to hire an assistant and all these things that people tell you should do too early in your journey.
Interesting. I love that framework. Thank you so much for spelling that out and bringing clarity to how that works. I'm really the idea of waiting to build the website until you're at that 14 plus stage 2. I mean, that's going to make a lot of our listeners uncomfortable. Shoot, that makes me uncomfortable. That's usually the first thing when I got a business idea. Buy the domain and put the template together for the website, because it's so easy. I mean, it feels like productivity. It feels like, hey, I'm again, entrepreneur, I'm building something. But it's interesting that the number of domains I own and website templates I have created with 0 customers. And so I really appreciate that framework.
It's safe. And that's why we teach it to everybody, because it changes the conversation. Because then all I have to do, because these are the patterns we do, we got to get a website up. And I go, would you put that in 1 to 4, 4 to 4? And everyone just starts to go, oh, that's a 14 plus thing. It's like, yeah, I mean, maybe it's a 4 to 10 thing, but it's like, are you telling me you can't get 4 customers with a PowerPoint deck or a Canva thing? Like, of course you can. Like, nobody buys because they come to your website and go like, wow, that's really well done, because there's patches in there. Like, you don't even have testimonials yet because you haven't delivered to the customers, and people can see that.
100%.
No, I love that framework. What, and within that, I'm curious, what are some other misconceptions in starting business or being an entrepreneur that you guys are regularly bumping into? One being the website and, being focused on solving a problem, being focused on delivering that to one person and building that credibility. What are some other misconceptions you're regularly bumping into?
There's a huge one out in the world now that I think is starting to come to light, which is this. We had this world of free money and SaaS startups and high revenue or high multiplier software companies. And it has set all these entrepreneurs down this path of, one, I want to raise money. Maybe you should, certainly not now. That's a later thing. And to do that, I need to build a SaaS company or a recurring revenue product company. And all I'm going to do is build the tool and I'm going to sell it and have this great multiplier. It's like, that's all well and good for you as an entrepreneur and for your investors. I understand why that works for you. But your customer usually doesn't just need a tool that could do anything. They need help. They need somebody to walk beside them, to handhold them a little bit. And I see a lot of entrepreneurs try to stay away from that because it's not the journey they have in their mind. And it doesn't matter. If your customer needs services with the tool or with the thing that you're building, that's the only way for success. You have to embrace the fact that they need that. And I've just seen so many people just try to ignore that, try to avoid getting dirty and walking with their customers. I tell people, I'm not saying like that you can't have that SaaS company with the high multiplier and the investors. I'm just saying that may be a 14 plus thing for you. Like you may have to get there through a different avenue. And I think people are coming around to that now because you can't raise money on hype anymore. And you can't just like go acquire a user base on millions of dollars. It doesn't exist anymore. So people are being forced to think about their unit economics and profitability. And like, how do I get a customer satisfied, not just hyped up and sort of using our product so I can increase the number of user count that I have and go back and talk to more investors. That's one of the other big ones.
Yeah, that's interesting to think about. Like even in my own business, the number of tools that are available to me, but they all promise to make my life so much easier, and yet the amount of time that I need to spend learning the ins and outs of each one. Yep. And so I can't tell you the number of SaaS products I've signed up for, done either the trial or had it for a month or two, and then just gotten so fed up with, I don't know how to use this. The promise is great, but I have no idea how to integrate this into my business. Yep. And there just doesn't seem to be the support there for a lot of those companies. And so I think that's a good point that you raise in terms of the importance of both knowing your customer, which happens in those early stages, right? Of that 1 to 14, you're having a lot more meaningful, intimate conversations with your customers, with your clients. And then I suppose the ongoing support is going to be hugely important moving forward as well.
Yep.
And it sounds like, that's totally what you guys are really all about. Like yes, there's a product in what you're building, but it sounds like that client relationship is paramount for you in everything that you're doing, and one of the ways that you're definitely setting yourself apart in the space. And so, what does that look like just as you're establishing client rapport? Whether it's KPIs or just, how do you measure client satisfaction and if you're really supporting them well?
Yeah, the simplest answer is to just ask them as you're delivering and as you're getting to the end of delivery, right? Like, and again, again, that's back to the 1-4-14, because like all the advice, if you ask that question in a vacuum to people, what are they going to tell you? They're going to start talking about NPS and Net Promoter Score and measurement things and how do you turn that into a number? And it's like, well, where are you on your journey? Because if I just sold you on something and I told you you'd be seeing value, we'd be done in probably 30 days, but like you're going to see value on like in week 1. It's like, well, I can just check in at the end of week 1 and be like, Nick, how you feeling? Right? Like, how are you feeling right now? Do you think that you're on the journey that I promised you? And then I can check in after week 2. And then as we're getting ready to wrap, I can be like, how do you feel? And I can be, and it's like, well, of course I want to sell you more and do the next piece, because ultimately I want to get you on that Automagic Engine software machine that I talked about, which I'm passionate about. So you just ask people. I'm like, that's it.
Yeah. That's cold. The issue, I imagine, though, is that as you scale, having those conversations gets really difficult, right? And so does that require having to scale your team pretty dramatically once you're past that 14 point? I mean, does that make you nervous at all, or what do you think?
Let me ask you a question. Why does that get difficult as you scale? To ask your customers if they're receiving value?
I think it's because as you have more and more customers, right, those conversations they can take up a significant amount of time. Certainly a whole lot more than, the little Adobe survey that I get once every 4 months where I just click, 4 or 5, how I'm liking the product, versus getting a call from a representative that genuinely cares, genuinely is taking notes. I mean, that's a whole nother level of service that requires time, manpower, how to record that feedback and turn it into something meaningful that goes out to all of your development teams. It gets complicated, I imagine.
Fair enough. And it does, right? So the reason I asked the question is like, absolutely, there's a point in scale where you don't have a choice but to send out a survey. But the reason I push back is because it's like, I think that point is so much further in a company's journey and maturity than people realize, that it's like you can push the simple human interaction and question asking way further than people realize. Also, like the evolution of all these tools that enable these types of surveys. And look, we love it. Ooh, I love the idea of a widget that just updates because a survey went out, right? But because of this, everybody's using those techniques. And what's getting scarcer in this world is authenticity and relationships and asking a question. We're like, sending a note or a custom video is becoming rare. So it's like, I push people to lean into it. It's like, sure, like go to that. You will know when it is time to go with that, because what I'm advocating for is no longer working and scaling, but it works way further than people think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not get away from the relationship component of business. And I'm reminded of that even as you're sharing. Business exists to solve problems for people, to serve people. And at the end of the day, like you said, they'll tell you. I mean, because you'll either get really happy people or folks who are not satisfied. So I love that.
Yeah.
Ethan, before we transition here just to the last couple golden nugget questions that we normally ask everybody, I'm curious, and Nick normally at the end of the episode says, hey, what are ways for folks to get in touch with you? But as our listeners are chiming in, checking out this episode, who's the perfect client that you guys are looking for, and who is somebody that you like to have conversations with where they are in their journey?
Yeah, sure. The technical answer is we target customers that have like 11 to 50 employees, is that range. But what I like to describe is we're looking for people that are at the bursting at the seams phase, which means you've expanded beyond that small core team. If you think of like businesses, I love this analogy of as a bicycle, where sales is the front wheel and operations is the back wheel, because wheels on a bicycle should ideally turn at the same speed. If you're at that point where sales is starting to kick in and you're going, oh crap, like I need to speed up that back wheel, that delivery wheel, and I'm afraid my teams can't keep up. And especially what I've found in my journey is that there's this bursting at the seams phase where you're hiring people, you're throwing bodies at problems, but you're seeing diminishing returns. You're going, oh crap, you actually have this pit in your stomach of, oh boy, I have to hire another person, I have to train them, or we don't have a training thing, and like there's all these questions and I'm going to have to give, that's bursting at the seams. That's what we built ScaleKits for, to solve all the bursting at the seams problems and just be like, great. You don't have to show me your mess. You got to show me little bits and pieces of it. But like, let me show you what the system looks like that allows you to go from that. It happens right around 10 to 15 employees. Is like, if we get you on this system now, you're on a system that scales. It can get you to 50, and those first principles will take you way beyond 50. That's our ideal client.
Love it. Love it. Well, man, thank you for the discussion. Thank you for the wisdom. I love the fact that you guys are working every day with business owners, entrepreneurs. So you are on the front line, seeing the problems, seeing the solutions, and you guys are a stopgap there. So I love it. Well, let's transition to our gold nugget round questions. I got 4 of them here for you. That sound good?
It works.
First one here. In reflecting on your journey, have you found yourself to be a journey or a destination person, and how has that impacted where you are today?
100% a journey person. That impacts both negatively and positively because I will constantly want to go find more journeys and do more experiences, like I talked about earlier. And so I've had to learn to go, hold on, I have to hyper focus on a destination here for a moment. And I have to get us to that destination and then have the, earn the right and the income to go find more journey time, which is both good and bad. I love the journey, man.
I love that. And I don't think anybody has talked about both sides of the journey being good and bad, but that's a good answer. Next one here, pick one of these. We talk about the 5 F's of abundant journey: family, faith, fitness, finance, and future. What's one of those that you are working on this year to grow in personally?
Yeah, sure. I love those pillars. We could talk about each of them, but if I have to pick one right now, the one that's core for me is fitness, because I have a bad back, and so that affects everything. Like, it affects my ability to be present with my family. It affects my ability to be present in my business. And I've got 3 kids and a wife and a very busy life. And so that's the thing that when things get crazy, I got to put that to the side. And I found that I can get into good workout routines. And then the moment there's a life shift, that's the thing that blows up for me, right? So move from New Jersey to South Carolina. I'm just too busy. It's okay. I'm too busy to go to the gym. And then my back starts hurting and then everything falls down. So I'm in a pretty good place now. Just had another disruption recently, but I got right back to it. Just some travel with the summer schedule and some travel. And that got away from me for a couple of weeks. And it's like, nope, I got to get up. I got to get to the gym and I got to work on my core. It's foundation.
I love that. And we're not a fitness podcast by any means, but I think, the more and more we unpack those different pillars of abundant journey, you're exactly right. They intertwine, they work together. And when one of those is out of whack, we oftentimes find that it impacts all the other ones. So I love that. Good answer. And good on you. Next one here. Why is it important to have an abundance versus scarcity mindset?
Yeah, I don't have any other thought, and like I have no other way to look at the world than through an abundant mindset. I've just never, it's not a finite pie. It's not a zero-sum game. I mean, there are zero-sum games, and I just don't want to play them. I think we're better together. Toby and I put together Magic Button Labs DNA library, 9 books that form the foundation of why we believe certain things that caused us to build this crazy thing that we're building. And one of those is Who Not How. And that's one of my favorite books because basically my takeaways are when you are procrastinating on something, it's because you don't know how to do it or you don't want to do it. And stop trying to figure out how to do it. Start thinking about who you need in your life because they love to do that thing, and you'll get energized to go find the who. And then what I love about finding a who, what they say is that if I'm a who for you, you also need to be a who for me. Like, we need to be doing something. It's a two-way street. And when you find another who, what happens immediately is your vision gets bigger, because you realize you can do these things that you weren't able to do by yourself or with your current team. And like, that's the abundant mindset at its core, is like, get more people involved, share, give more value, figure something out how to help people. Like, it'll attract more people. Your vision will get bigger. You'll be doing more things. It's just like this flywheel.
Good. I love that. Last one here. What is a dream or goal that you have that you've not been able to make happen yet?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm not broke, and I am not independently wealthy. And one of my dreams and goals is to be able to provide community and to be able to provide access to things. You see a lot of people with money, and they buy more houses and boats and things, and they keep them to themselves or small friends. What I want to be able to do with whatever wealth that I can create is to share that with more people and share it openly, and just pull people together. And if I want a big house, it's not because I personally want a big house. It's like, I want to be able to host parties. The house that we bought, like, it's not the nicest house, but why did we buy it? Because it's near downtown and it has a big yard. And so we can get to work fixing that up and turn it into a community space where have people over, entrepreneurs and or friends on Thursday nights or Sunday brunches and things like that. I just want to be able to pull. I think community is the only thing that matters at the end of the day, community and relationships. And there's so many people with resources that could be doing that just aren't.
I love that response, and man, just totally cut from the same cloth in terms of what ultimately matters at the end of the day. And no wonder Toby thought we would love talking with you so much. He is absolutely right. So Ethan, thank you, man. I really appreciate all of your insight. Love what you're building with Magic Button Labs, and just can't wait to see how that continues to grow. I know you're fairly active on LinkedIn, but where is the best place for our listeners to connect with you, to follow along with what you're building and doing?
It's LinkedIn, Nick. That's where I'm active. And to the conversation we just had, right? Like, we are we're finally at the point where we're like, hey, if you go look for our websites, it'll be confusing because we slapped up what we had to when we had to. And we're in the process now of clarifying the distinction between ScaleKits and the other companies in Magic. So you won't find us there in a way that's meaningful. I'm on LinkedIn, and you can hit me up there, and I'm super active and I'm always responsive.
Awesome. Well, listeners, there's a link to Ethan's LinkedIn page in the show notes, so do be sure to connect with him there. While you're at it, make sure to connect with us at the abundantjourney.net website. There's a newsletter. If you haven't already subscribed to the show or given the video a like, please do so that more people can hear Ethan's story and insights. And we appreciate you all very much. Look forward to being back with you soon.